We're joined right now by Dr. Lawrence Bartman. He's a GP and former chair of the BMA GPs Committee. And Lawrence, I know you can't comment on a report that you've not seen. I completely understand that. But in terms of this blood scanner, we've known about it for many years. There was a clear cover-up, a blatant cover-up by the NHS, knowing that thousands of people were given contaminated blood, which killed some and completely changed people's lives. You worked in the NHS fees. How does that happen?
Everybody wants to make it look like it wasn't anything to do with them.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid it was very much to do with the NHS. The NHS made a serious set of blunders, and having realised they were blunders, typical for the NHS, I'm sorry to say, and I'm guessing other health systems too, they then don't want to say, oh, we made a mistake early enough that they didn't go on to kill an awful lot of people. And it's disgraceful. And the fact that there's no compensation is also disgraceful.
Yeah, absolutely. And lessons will be learned. Never are. And again, the compensation issue continues for us. Let's talk about what we invited you on to talk about. We've already had developments, indeed, on that subject. But yesterday we had the result of the BMA resident, no longer junior doctors, resident doctors ballot on striking, and a 90% vote to strike. Although actually it's only 30% of all resident doctors who voted to strike. There were only 45% of those entitled to vote didn't even vote. And we've already today got dates. We're going to see a full walkout from resident doctors from 7 o'clock in the morning on Friday the 20th of July till 7 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday the 30th of July. That's going to have a big impact. We know when we've seen previous strikes, we've seen, patients literally die because there's a shortage of doctors. People have seen delayed treatment, cancelled appointments. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, said yesterday the public won't forgive you if you do this. He said, and neither will I. What do you make of that?
I think you're right. I think the public will not forgive doctors who are not badly paid. They won't forgive them for going on an all-out strike. I think it's a very strange tactic. If you want to keep people with you, not healing the sick seems to me to be the absolute opposite of what I qualified for. So it's just not a strategy I would ever employ.
But doctors say, look, we've gone on strike before. We got our pay rise. We got 22%, and then they do another 5%, 22% for 2 years, backdated, another 5%. Now they're asking for just over 29%. They say our wages are not what they were in real terms compared to 2010. After austerity and all the inflation we've had in recent years, we are out of pocket. We're paid less than we used to be in real terms, and we want a pay rise. Otherwise, we're out. I mean, we have a shortage of doctors. We can't keep doctors. We can't recruit some doctors to the NHS. If we want to have waiting lists tackled and more patients treated, is this a price we have to pay, some might say?
No. I think you have to look at the whole package. I have to tell you, my bit of the NHS, I haven't had a pay rise since 2019. So,
yeah, but GPs were very well paid.
That is true. And I have to take the blame for some of that. But I don't think industrial action of this sort actually raises your profile in a good way. I think you have to look at the package of pay and conditions.
What do you mean by that? So the pension payments and...
Right, it's much more than money. Doctors, some of them, particularly junior doctors, are not treated very well, and I don't mean in financial terms. And their rotas are very difficult for some of them. And although I have to say pretty gentle compared to what I was used to when I was a junior doctor. But I can see why they're bothered, but I just don't think that taking action against patients is the way to do it.
Well, what should they do then? Because they would argue, we've got a right to withdraw our labour. What are the powers? I'm sounding like I'm on their side. I'm not. But what other powers do they have?
Right. Well, you're not just looking at what you take home, but looking at what goes on when you're at work. And there are all sorts of ways. For example, enlarging a rota without reducing people's pay, so that you do, if you want to look at it, less work for the same money. But I think going for a pay rise that's so huge looks odd to the public.
And it looks greedy, doesn't it? Because the reality is the vast majority of people, whether in the public or private sector, have seen their pay eroded since 2010, either from freezes or very low pay rises below inflation, then pay rises which largely didn't keep up for a long time with the high inflation we had from the energy crisis. And, I mean, lots of people are struggling. And the people will go, well, why are you special? I mean, other NHS workers didn't get a pay rise, anything close to doctors, did they?
No. And like I said, my bit hasn't had anything.
I am not getting out my tiny violin for GPs.
I'm not asking you to. But I do think that taking industrial action that says I will not do the one thing that actually people need seems to me to be an odd strategy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, the public support, and as Wes Streeting has pointed out, actually, patients do not support the proposed strike action. And when we look back to support they had, a couple of years ago, it was like at least 2/3 of people would say they support it. It crept down to just above 50%. And now it's, about a third of people who would support. Do you think people have gone, OK, you've had your pay rise, you made your point, and now you're going to have to suck it up? Because the reality is, most of these people are not going to leave the NHS or leave Britain to go work in New Zealand, are they?
I hope not. Recruitment is actually across the NHS is pretty difficult.
But then that's an argument for pay rises, as well as conditions.
That's an argument for improved conditions, because I won't be any less knackered if you double my pay. So what I want to look at is why I'm so exhausted, not how rich I am.
Why are doctors so exhausted, though? Because, again, you talked about your training when you were a junior doctor, and I remember the hours. My mum was doing an 80-hour week when she was training to be a doctor. We were kids, and we were very aware of that. Now, you'd be on call. OK, you'd be allowed to you'd have a little bunk to go and sleep in, be on call for like 4 days. But, I mean, it's like the same with GPs. They're all saying, oh, we're so stressed, we can only work a 3-day week. And I go into my GP surgery, there's no patients in there. I don't know what they're so stressed about.
We haven't got time to discuss why GPs are so stressed, beyond saying that their workload isn't just what you see in the waiting.
I know that. But still, are doctors' jobs so much harder, more onerous and stressful now than they used to be?
Yes, the rate of throughput is much faster. And so it should be. I think we actually have to look at the waiting list and say, how on earth do we get this down? What we don't do is get it down by withdrawing labour. I think that's a very strange way of doing it. I think what we have to do is say, Mr. Streeting says to the doctors, look, we've got a very big backlog of work here. We have to cover it. How can we do that constructively without saying we have to put more money into the NHS?
Because it's already got a load more money. Isn't there also the final issue, the BMA? It is basically, I mean, it's, card carrying, communist sort of student union politics now. I mean, the last conference they had, I think there were more amendments and proposals regarding Gaza than there were about cutting waiting lists, for goodness sake.
Yes. Well, I'm not a member anymore.
For a reason.
Because of that.
Yeah.
I don't speak for the BMA.
Yeah.
I know I did, but I don't now. I think the BMA obviously is got new management now, there's a new team at the top, and I hope they will be able to be a professional association like they were when I was.
Yeah, there used to be a trade union, not a campaigning group. There we are. Dr. Lawrence Butman, great to talk to you as a GP. Formerly no longer represents the BMA. Claire Pearsall, you're joining us. Look, you work to the Home Office. The police aren't allowed to strike. Prison officers aren't allowed to strike. There's a reason. I think there's a big question mark about people working in the National Health Service whether they're allowed to strike, actually.
Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't be able to. I'm not a fan of anybody striking. I mean, that's no surprise to anybody. I don't like unions. I don't like striking. I don't like that kind of industrial action.
They won us an awful lot of the rights that you and I take for granted. Did you have maternity leave? That wasn't just given to you on a plate.
I just think fundamentally when you have something like this, and as your guest has just said, increased wages for junior doctors, for resident doctors, are not going to make them any less stressed, not going to make their workload any more manageable. What's it going to do? It's going to put more strain on the economy of the United Kingdom. And
the key thing is also the next set of workers. Again, you give that big payment to the train drivers, to the doctors, and then everyone else goes, well, hold on a minute, I've just settled for 3% or 4%. Exactly. You're asking for 29%. Where's mine? Yeah. And at the end of the day, again, there aren't so many doctors. There's thousands of them, but there are a lot more nurses and other NHS staff and porters, and then you're into the 100,000 teachers, and then you.
Well, exactly.
And where does it end?
Yeah, exactly.
Where does it end?
Who's the next?
There isn't any money. There isn't any money. I'm just saying.